And, I'm real sick of hearing people say, to make America great again, because that word again means go back to the 50s, which was real good for white men, but wasn't worth a damn for people of color and women. You need to know that, and that's what this fool wants us to do.
I want every white person in this room who would be happy to be treated as this society in general treats our citizens, our black citizens. If you, as a white person, would be happy to receive the same treatment that our black citizens do in this society, please stand. You didn't understand the direction. If you white folks want to be treated the way blacks are in this society, stand. Nobody's standing here. That says very plainly that you know what's happening. You know you don't want it for you. I want to know why you're so willing to accept it or to allow it to happen for others.
And that young man who was talking about MAGA, you need to realize that MAGA stands for Make Americans Grumble Again. And that Make Americans Grumble Again. And that's exactly what we are doing in order to keep that man from destroying this democracy. That is the problem, people. He wants to destroy this democracy. He wants to turn it into either an oligarchy or a theocracy. And this is a man who talks theocracy, who holds the Bible upside down. I want you folks to do something. I want every white person, every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the white race to stand. Right now. Right now. Every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the white race. Now, remain standing. Now, remain standing. Now, will every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the black race please stand? Up, 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 up. And remain standing. Now, the brown race. Anybody who considers himself or herself a member of the brown race. Now, the yellow race. Now, the red race. Now, look around you, people. Practically everybody is standing. Now, will every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the human race please sit down? Now, people, you are all members of the same race, the human race, which started with black women between 300,000. Don't interrupt me, I don't have much time. Now, white folks, you don't like it, but all you are is faded blacks. That's the way it is. Every one of you, if you trace your DNA back far enough, you're going to find that some of your DNA came from Africa. Because we all have the same ancestor back there, every single one of us. And those of you who think you don't have are obviously from outer space. Now, that means that every one of us is a 30th to 50th cousin to every other person in this room. So I want you to turn to the person on your left or your right or behind or in front of you, stick out your hand and say, "Hi, cousin." Now, will every person in this room who considers himself or herself a biracial person stand? Don't you stand. Don't you stand. People, we have to get rid of the language of racism. Words are important, people. Words matter. You have to be careful how you use them, and you have to refuse to tolerate these ugly words being used in your presence. Now, make no mistake about this. I've been described as a teacher. I'm not a teacher. Teachers dispense facts and figures so that they can get their kids ready for the end of school testing. I've been called a trainer. You train dogs and horses and members of the military. I don't train people. I'm an educator. The word educator, I don't want to be interrupted anymore. People, the word educator comes from the root duck deuce, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. Now, in this country, we spend a lot of money on what we call education. It isn't education, it's indoctrination. It takes us 13 years to teach a student, to educate a student, to be ignorant about race, and to support ideas that make this a better country. This is a word for this in my vernacular, since I was raised on a farm, is bullshit. Don't write that down. People, I recognize it when I see it, and that's what we're living with right now. If we were in post-racial society, Donosaurus T. Rump would not be in the White House. He got elected because white people resented having a black man in the White House for 8 years. It's time to face the truth and say the truth, and it's time for women, and all people of color to stop playing defense and defending what they are and go on the offense. We were here first. We don't have to apologize for what we are or for what we do. Now, I know some of you are thinking, boy, is she a bitch? Yes, I am. Now, how many of you women have been called the B word? Look around, fellas. Everybody's heard it. Come up with a new word. Now, how many of you are called that by a male? All right, people, for me, the B word is an acronym for being in total control, honey. And when women are seen in control, the men around them call it the B word. You need to say, you're right, darling, I am. And then you need to whip out your little Lorena Bobbitt fruit knife. Now, don't do that, because some of these boys are scared to death. Now some of you are thinking, she doesn't like men. Oh, God, do I like men. Oh, Find me one, please, please. Some of my best friends are men. I was married to one for 59 years. When I married him, he looked just like Marlon Brando. He really did. When he died, he looked like Telly Savalas. Lived with me for 59 years. And what's your next question?
Now sitting in a room where two powerful voices are having a conversation about racism, not simply as something individuals do, but as something that can be built into the way people are thought to see the world. That is the kind of a conversation we are looking at today. In a discussion that involves activist and educator Jane Elliott and a scholar and activist Angela Davis. So guys, the conversations moves far beyond the usual arguments about racism. It asks some important questions. Questions like, where did the idea of race come from? Why do people continue to hold racial beliefs even when those beliefs have no scientific basis? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when education stops teaching people about to think and they start teaching them what to think? So guys, let's get into the video, and remember, you are going to buy me a coffee if you are going to click the subscription button. Otherwise, I'll be back with my 2 cents.
Let's talk about privilege.
Angela, you want to talk about privilege?
The first, and this goes to you, Jane, first. How did you first become aware? This is a reflective question. How did you first become aware of your own privilege? And how did you first become aware that others had more privilege than you? And I'm going to ask the same of you also.
Oh, you want me to go first?
So you go first.
I never thought of it as white privilege. I just thought if you do the right thing, people will do the right thing where you're concerned. And because I'm white, they did. And they were wrong. Because I've been doing the wrong thing for about 33 years, I did the wrong thing. I thought I was all right. And then I did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. And I watched a brilliant little blue-eyed white girl turn into a frightened,
intimidated, unable to learn child in the space of 15 minutes because I accused her of not being smart enough because she had the wrong color eyes. And I watched 4 dyslexic brown-eyed boys read words they had never been able to read and spell words they had never been able to spell because nobody had ever told them that they could learn to read or spell. But on the day they had brown eyes, it was obvious that the world was theirs. They could do anything. I found out about expectations that day, and I realized that what we have done, what we white folks have done in this country, ever since we got here, is treat people positively or negatively, not on the basis of the color of their skin, but on the basis of our ignorance about skin color, where it comes from and what it causes. This is not about skin color, this is about ignorance. And the answer to ignorance is education. It is not indoctrination, it is not schooling, it is not training, it is education. But you have to have teachers who know better if they're going to teach better. And teachers can only teach what they know. And unfortunately for all of us, we've all been led down the same ugly path of thinking that it's all right to claim privilege when what we should be claiming is ignorance. We've got the wrong word here, people. This problem is white ignorance. And white people are running the show. Now you're going to think she's a traitor to her race. I'm not a traitor to the human race, and that's the only race I see. Make no mistake about that. And as long as we keep on acting as though there are several races, we can have panels like this at which we discuss white privilege instead of discussing white ignorance and deciding to do something about it. We need to start really furnishing education in these schools instead of furnishing indoctrination. Did that answer your question?
Yes, partially.
All right.
The rest of the question is, so how did you become aware of your own privilege or of others having more privilege than you? You're talking about...
I watched my students.
It was watching the students.
And I realized, watching them, that they were exhibiting the behaviors that they were copying from me. They acted hey, my little brown-eyed students, the day they were on the top in that exercise, became me. And it made me sick to my stomach, and it does to this day. I hate to remember that day, because I watched my brown-eyed children we just loved one another in my classroom. We really did. And on that day, I found out that I don't want to be tolerated. Because in that classroom, my kids tolerated me because I'm blue-eyed. The first thing that was said after I told the kids that blue-eyed people aren't as smart as brown-eyed people, a little brown-eyed child in the front row, Debbie Hughes, looked up at me and said, "How come you're the teacher here if you got them blue eyes?" I got a real experience that day, and a real educational experience, people. I found out how I look to people of color. And I have spent the last 50 years trying not to look like that and trying to encourage others to stop it. I'll tell you another thing. Do I have a few more minutes here? My father, at the age of 60, watched the film that the CBC made in my classroom the second year I did the exercise. They sent me a copy of it, and I showed it to my father and my mother. My father was 60 years old, the most honest man, the most moral man I've ever known. I showed him that film. When it was over, he stood up, and in his bib overalls and his blue chambray shirt rolled up to the elbows, he reached in his back pocket, took out his red handkerchief, and with tears in his eyes, he blew his nose and said, "I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old." You can criticize what I do until the cows come home. And psychologists do until they get smart. I don't listen anymore because my father said, "I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old." If somebody had taught my father that when he was 9 years old, we would never have had to listen to some of the ridiculous racist remarks that he made. And he never made them again after he watched that film. Don't tell me that you can't change people. Don't tell me that you're too old to change. There isn't a person in this room who is too old to change. White folks, you got to change. Because within 30 years, you will be a numerical minority in the United States of America. And you had better pray to whoever you pray to or for, that people of color are not going to get even with us and treat us the way we have treated them. If you can't think of If you can't think of any other reason for treating people like equal human beings, think of that one. Because what you do today is creating the future. I don't think you want the kind of future that you have provided for people in the present. I may be mistaken. You may not know what's going on. You know what's going on. And if I asked you, if every white person in this room who wants to be treated the way we have treated people of color in this country, if you'd like to be treated that way, all you white folks, if you want that for the rest of your life, please stand. Did you understand the directions? If you're white and you think blacks have got it so good in this country and you want to be treated the way they have been for the rest of your life, just stand up. You know why you aren't standing. You know it's ugly, and you know it's happening, and you know you don't want it to happen to you. So I want to know why you're so willing to allow it for others in this post-racial society. Another question?
Okay, so we're talking about privilege and how you first became aware that others had more privilege than you, and how you might have been aware that you had more privilege than others.
Today I asked a young woman how long she thinks this has been going on, this racism against blacks. How long do you think it's been going on? Forever? You're wrong. 500 years. During the Spanish Inquisition, the people who were running the Spanish Inquisition and killing people because of their religion found out that they killed a whole lot of people who had the right religion. They couldn't tell what their religion is by looking at them. So they decided they had to find another way to identify the people that they were going to kill and enslave, and/or enslave. So they set upon skin color. People, it's only 500 years old. Now think of that. It's only 500 years old. Nobody was born a racist. There is no gene for bigotry. You were not born a racist. You have to be taught to be a racist, and you have to be carefully taught. And if you haven't seen that musical, in which the last song is, you have to be taught to be afraid of people whose skin is a different shade, of people whose eyes are differently made. You have to be carefully taught.
South Pacific.
Yes, South Pacific. You have to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You have to be carefully taught. And that's what we have to do in this country to keep this racism alive. If we want racism to stop, we have to stop teaching racism. In our homes, in our churches, people, Jesus did not look like the little Pillsbury Doughboy. And God is not an old white man with a long gray beard that looks like Charlton Heston playing Moses. And Mary did not have pale skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes. Get over it. And do it now. You can make a difference if you choose to, you young people. How many of you have parents, mothers, who are really tired of sending Christmas cards? I'll tell you how to solve that problem. Go down to the store, buy a box of Christmas cards with the Holy Family picture on it. Take it home, color and write. When your mother sends those out this year, she'll never get another Christmas card from most of those people. People, we have to absolutely refuse to tolerate the intolerable. Elie Wiesel said, you must not tolerate the intolerable. And if it's intolerable for you, my cousins, then by the gods of war, it's intolerable for me, and I will not tolerate it. This has gone on long enough. This has gone on long enough. And we have gone along to get along long enough. We need to put a stop to it. And you can. Educators can. Educators can change this. If I can, you can. Get busy. But first,
this is a question that fits right with what you're saying. How can we talk about race and privilege with openness and inclusiveness in a way that prevents people from shutting down?
People can shut down or not, that's up to them.
Okay.
Let me tell you something. I am not responsible for how you respond to me. You got it? I flat out don't care. If you learn something in here this evening from this woman,
who has forgotten more than I'll ever know about racism. And what little I know, if you decide to learn something in here tonight, you'll learn something. If you decide to be mad, you'll be mad. Go ahead, I don't care. That's your problem, not mine. I'm not responsible for how you feel. I am responsible for what I say. I'm responsible for what I do. You're responsible for your response to it. Be responsible for your responses. I'm not responsible for it.
Okay, I want to hear what Angela has to say to this.
Well, I totally agree with Jane.
Okay.
How can I not?
Accept that.
As someone who has spent many years teaching university students, teaching graduate students, I've learned that it makes no sense for me to simply tell my students what it is I think they ought to know. You know, they might learn enough to write a good paper, and then they'll move on, moving in another direction. So I've come to the conclusion that teaching really is about helping people to ask the right questions, to ask the right questions, and to be able to come to the conclusion themselves that there is something really terribly wrong with the way racism has shaped the history of this planet. So I think education is about unleashing the imagination. What teachers, unfortunately, most often do is shut down the imagination and to prevent people from exploring the world in their own ways. And so I think that certainly there are many questions to be asked about race and racism, about the fact that race is a fictive concept. As Jane was pointing out, we're all members of the same human race. Race is a social construction. Race was produced by racism. But of course, this does not mean that it doesn't cause damage in the world, that it hasn't been the producer, the generator of the worst kind of violence one can imagine. But I think that what we try to do is to get people to come to that conclusion on their own. And not on their own as individuals. See, one of the reasons we have so many problems in this country and in this world, particularly during this neoliberal era, is because we have been encouraged to think of ourselves as individuals primarily and not members of a larger community. You know, so when we think about getting rid of racism, we think about changing individuals. It's not going to happen simply by changing individuals. The structures produce racism even when the individuals assume that they are anti-racist. You know, how is it that we ended up with a prison system with such a vast majority of people of color? You know, how is it that there are over 2 million people in the jails and prisons and immigrant detention facilities and jails in Indian country and military prison? How did that happen? If we don't, ask the kinds of questions that will allow us to understand how racism shapes all of the important institutional structures in this society.
What's the call for action you would issue to this group?
So who's first?
Who's first? Oh, I'm first?
Here.
Yeah.
Turn off your television. Pick up a book. Go out of your way to meet somebody you would never have wanted to meet before. Look at that person as a cousin and say, I want to know what I can do to make my life less ugly where you're concerned. And never, white people, walk up to the nearest black person and say, what's it like to be black? And never, when I come to speak to your school, or your college or your university, never say to me, I think we should ignore differences and talk about similarities. Similarities are more important than differences. And never let me hear you say, when I see people, I don't see people as black or brown or red or yellow. I just... And how about this one from a teacher? I don't care whether you're black, brown, red, yellow, or green with purple polka dots. I'm going to treat you all alike. How many of you have heard that one out of a teacher? How many of you have ever seen people who are green with purple polka dots? Well, you see, when a teacher lumps all those people in with those who are green with purple polka dots, she's saying you're all like aliens from another planet. She never says white in there. She never says white, because it's all right to see white. How many of you have had a person stand up when you were speaking and say, I just look for the person's heart? People, the next time somebody says that to you, you need to say, if you can see my heart from where you are, you should go down to the local hospital and volunteer to be their X-ray machine. You see, this whole thing is ridiculous. To treat people positively or negatively on the basis of your ignorance about skin color is ridiculous. Now here's something else you can do. Go to my website. A teacher, a real educator, quite frankly, gave me a list of commitments to combat racism. Go to my website, janeelliott.com, take that list, download it, go through it, check yes, those that you have done, check no, those that you haven't done, circle one that you check no, and do it for a month. At the end of the month, take out the paper and make notes on it as to how your life has changed as a result of doing that one thing. There are 18 things on that paper. Then, read the list of typical statements that white folks make that think they aren't racist. Check those that you would be inclined to say that you have heard. Then, read the clarifications of those statements. Well, how they are being heard by the person to whom you're saying them. If you do that, that will change your white awareness. And our problem is white lack of awareness. Make no mistake about this. People of color know about racism. They recognize it when they hear it. And when you say to a person of color, I don't see you black, you ought to have your tongue cut out first. I can't examine your head, but people, if what you're saying is being perceived as racist, say something else. Perception is everything. If what you are saying is being perceived as racist, change your language. You can do that. If you choose to, you better choose to. But you better choose to. There are 18 things on that list of commitments to combat racism. I challenge you to do 3 of them in the next 3 months. It'll change people's attitude toward you and your awareness of the world.
So guys, the conversation begins with an idea that may sound simple, but carries enormous implications. There is only one human race, guys. That is what this conversation starts with. Elliott challenges the idea that humanity is naturally divided into separate biological races. Instead, she presents race as a social construction, a system created and developed by societies to classify people and historically to justify unequal treatment. Her argument is that these categories did not simply appear because human beings naturally understood themselves that way. So, they developed within particular historical circumstances. And once those categories were created, they could be used to establish hierarchies. Some people could be placed at the top, others could be placed at the bottom. And suddenly, discrimination could be presented as if it were natural. That is where the conversation becomes much deeper, guys. Because if racial categories are socially constructed, then the question becomes, why were they constructed in the first place? Elliott connects the development of modern racial thinking to the history of enslavement and oppression. The argument is not simply that people were treated differently because of a skin color. It is that societies developed ideas about skin color that help justify treating certain groups as less human, less deserving, or less entitled to freedom. And once those ideas became part of society, they can survive for generations, guys. A child can inherit a belief without ever being told where that belief came from. A student can learn a version of history, guys, without realizing what has been left out. And that brings the conversation to one of its most important themes, guys. That is the education. Elliott makes a distinction between teaching and education. Teaching, in the simplest sense, can mean giving someone information, but education, she argues, should do something much bigger. It should help people move out of ignorance. It should encourage people to question assumptions, investigate evidence, and understand a perspective beyond their own experiences. And this is where Jane Elliott and Davis raises a serious concern. What happens when an education system gives students information without teaching them how to question that information? What happens when students memorize history but never ask who wrote that history? What happens when they learn about major events but never examine whose voice were missing from their story? So, according to the argument presented in this conversation, that can turn education into indoctrination, and that is a powerful distinction because indoctrination doesn't necessarily mean someone is standing in front of a classroom telling students what to believe. Sometimes it can happen much more quietly. It can happen throughout what gets included. It can help throughout what gets ignored. It can happen through which historical figures are celebrated and which experiences receive little attention. And it can help when students are discouraged from asking difficult questions. The purpose of education then should not simply be to fill someone's head with information. It should be to give that person the tools to examine the word critically. And that leads directly into another idea from Elliott. That is white ignorance. Elliott argues that in the conversation about racism sometimes focuses heavily on the idea of white privilege, but she wants people to look at another problem, that is ignorance. Her challenge is particularly directed towards the white people who may have grown up without having to confront certain realities experienced by people of color. If someone really encounters discrimination personally, it can become easy to assume that this discrimination is no longer a serious problem. But not experiencing something does not mean that something does not exist. And that is an important point. You don't have to personally experience a problem in order to take the time to understand it. You can listen, you can read, and you can also ask questions. And most importantly, you can be willing to discover that something you once believed may have been incomplete or wrong. So, that process can be uncomfortable, guys. But according to Elliott, discomfort can be part of a genuine learning. And this is where Angela Davis brings another dimension into the discussion. Davis has spent decades examining racism, inequality, imprisonment, and the structure that shapes people's lives. So one of the issues she highlights is the prison industrial complex. Her broader argument is that we cannot understand racial inequality simply by looking at individual attitudes. We also have to examine institutions. Who is arrested? Who is prosecuted? Who is exposed to poverty? And how do these systems interact with one another? These questions move the conversations away from simply asking whether individual people are racist. Instead, they ask us to examine whether institutions and social structures can produce unequal outcomes, even when individuals may not openly describe themselves as prejudiced. And that distinction is extremely important, guys, because racism can operate through personal beliefs, but it can also operate through systems, policies, traditions, and patterns that continue over time. Davis's perspective, therefore, it encourages people to look beyond individual behavior and examine the larger structure surrounding the behavior. And now we come back to the question of education, guys. If education is supposed to lead people out of ignorance, then perhaps the first step is learning how to question what we think we already know. That means questioning the language we use, questioning the assumptions, and even questioning sources we automatically trust. Elliott's challenge is practical. Okay? Listen to perspective you may have previously ignored. That is, you must read more. Pay attention to the language you use. And when you encounter an uncomfortable idea, don't immediately run away from it. Ask why it makes you uncomfortable and whether the discomfort comes from the idea itself or from discovering something you had never been taught. That is a very different approach to learning. And it is also where the conversations becomes personal because it is easy to talk about racism as if it is somebody else's problem. So, but Elliott's challenge is much closer to home. What assumptions do I carry? What have I never questioned? Those questions don't belong to one political party or one racial group. They belong to everyone, and perhaps that is the most important lesson from the conversation. So, guys, it is about recognizing that history can be complicated, and it is about understanding that people can inherit ideas without realizing where those ideas came from. Jane Elliott's message is ultimately a challenge to ignorance, guys. So, that was a very important things that Jane Elliott has raised in this video. And those people who are there, they should take notes and they should be very keen about this thing. Otherwise, Jane Elliott has been a very good educator. He has been telling people about, he has been giving good teaching about this racism. So guys, this was a very good conversation. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like it and also share, subscribe to my channel. Otherwise, thank you very much. Until I see you in the next one.